Welcome to Education in Focus. I'm your host, Aliana Kernodle. The Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights announced last Wednesday that it had come to a resolution with the Oklahoma School District where non-binary student Nex Benedict attended before their death in February. Joining me with more on this story is Chalkboard News editor Brendan Clary. Brendan, what conclusions did the Office of Civil Rights lay out in its letter on this matter?
Yeah, Eliana, that's a great question. Basically, like in a nutshell, the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights found that the school, quote, generally failed to fulfill its Title IX obligations during the 2021-2022 and the 2022-2023 and the 2023-2024 school years by investigating sexual harassment outside the Title IX process and procedures. So what they found is that in response to complaints about sexual harassment, they did not follow the specific procedures that were spelled out under the Title IX regulations, as amended in 2020. So it was like they failed to notice that students, including Nex Benedict, who they call Student A in the letter, were subjected to sexual harassment, and then not adopting a grievance process that contains the basic requirements of the regulation, and then by not fulfilling the Title IX record-keeping obligations. So there are specific procedures for sexual harassment complaints under federal law, and the Office of Civil Rights says that they did not follow those procedures to a T. So, and there is some back and forth, which we can get into with the school district that they've had, where the school district maintains one thing, and the parents of Nex Benedict have a different, perspective on that. So, but essentially what it gets down to is that the Office of Civil Rights says the school district didn't follow the regulations.
Yeah, so let's get into some of that back and forth.
So the school district essentially maintains that it was not aware of the sexual harassment that was allegedly taking place against Nex Benedict. And for those who aren't aware of the backstory of this was a national news issue earlier this year, when the Independent reported that Nex Benedict was bullied at their high school, and then eventually ended up in the hospital and died. And so the story initially kind of suggested at that time that it was because of the bullying incident that the student ended up in the hospital and died. And that, I think, is what garnered a lot of national attention and a lot of the outrage at school officials. And in the letter, the school district maintains that it was not aware of a lot of that bullying, especially the sexual harassment angle of that bullying, where students were invoking gender identity and different elements of identity in the taunting and different things like that. So Sue Benedict, Nex Benedict's mother, was saying to the Office of Civil Rights interviewers, investigators, essentially that there wasn't really a way for the school not to know that there was sexual harassment going on. So, but the school district does maintain that it did not know that. And so basically the Office of Civil Rights kind of suggests that it probably knew about it. And so that is kind of where it gets into they're sort of making a decision on this. But the resolution agreement, it's important to note, doesn't necessarily say that the school did anything wrong, but it is voluntarily entering into this with the federal government to be compliant with federal law. So it's basically saying we are not saying we did anything wrong, but we're going to do this to take preventative measures from anything like this happening again. And this wasn't the only incident. So there's other incidents, if the federal government comes into, probably most school districts, and they're asking very pointed questions about whether they followed the specifics on federal law and these different protocols, they probably find different instances where they didn't follow things exactly right. And I think that's, you start looking into it and you're like, okay, there's these other procedures here. But it gets into, a little bit of a dicier territory of why would the school district go through a Title IX process if they weren't aware of some of that sexual harassment. So if they are telling the truth, then it's that shows why they weren't doing that. If they were just addressing it as a bullying issue, and they were not aware of that sexual harassment. And there are specifics in the case too, and you can read the letter for yourself if you're interested in it. To our listeners, it's all online. It's publicly available, and we link to it at Chalkboard. But there's a lot of back and forth about when they like what they told school counselors and when they told school counselors these certain things about the alleged harassment. So I think that kind of complicates things. And like a lot of these kinds of issues, it gets very into the weeds very quickly about who knew what and when. And at the end of the day, it's a lot of, well, this is what they say, and then this is what, these are these other like contested facts. And that's the language that the letter uses, is that they're contested facts.
And you mentioned they entered into this resolution. What are kind of the terms of that agreement? What does the school district have to do?
There's specific things that they have to do. They have to publish something like an anti-harassment statement saying that, students have the right and the ability to file these Title IX complaints and have specific contact of who they need to talk to. They also have to report a lot of these things to the federal government. So it's kind of like making sure that they're going to follow up. And there's a lot of different kinds of like what's called reporting requirements that they submit to the Office of Civil Rights for review and approval. So there's a notice of non-discrimination that they have to review. They also have to, review in the district's grievance procedure under Title IX. So there's like a lot of this like regulatory stuff, and then also have to do Title IX staff training. They have to do student training. They have to do different kinds of training assessments. So it just kind of keeps going on about, there's a lot of different facets that the school district is required to take action on. And it's pretty extensive. And that also affects record keeping. And there's also, some of these, they have pretty broad regulatory power in terms of what they can ask a school to do and follow up on. And I believe too, there's also making sure that the parents of the students who are affected are also they receive specific kinds of support and assistance. So there's that element as well from what I remember reading about this.
Well, Brendan, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at chalkboardnews.com.